Hi, my name is Scott McLean from TranceMusicMastery.com. In this video, I'm going to show you how Adam Sabo created an acid sequence style lead sound, and it sounds like this. Okay, now let me just show you the MIDI clip real quick for this sound. This is simply one note held. It's an A note, A1, and it's just being held for the first bar, and then that just loops around. So this is sort of one of those one note wonder type of sounds where you just hold one note down and it does all the work. But I'll demonstrate after we program the patch how this sound can sound different if you play many notes at once, sort of a sequence of 16th notes. So let me bring up the sound map. And Adam Sabo says, a nice acid sequence sound used in lots of trance tracks. It's usually made of some detuned saws or squares sent through a distortion to give that acidy sound. Before the sound enters the distortion effect, one must have a filter with high resonance to have that old school TB303 acid feel. Usually they use a low pass filter, but band pass or even high pass sounds good. So in this patch, Adam is using an oscillator with 11 stacked saw waves and modulating the volume of oscillator 1 with multi-stage envelope generator number 2. And then that flows into a filter, and here we have a bandpass res band type filter with the cutoff frequency modulated by a global LFO and multi-stage envelope generator number 1. And then that flows into a shaper to add distortion, and then through the amplifier with the volume being modulated by envelope 1 with 0 attack, 0 decay, sustain at 100% and 0 release. And then that flows into the effects and to the main output. For the effects, we have EQ1 with a low shelf minus 6 dB cut near 160 Hz, a bandpass plus 5 dB boost near 1.75 kHz, and a high shelf plus 4.5 dB boost near 8 kHz. And that flows through a delay. This is a stereo delay. The left sync set to 1/8 and the right set to 1/4. Feedback is 30, 43% dry wet mix, and then that flows into a reverb with approximately a 3-second reverb tail and low dampening for a bright reverb, and then to the main output. Okay, let's build this patch. Okay, so I'm starting from the initialized patch, so if I play the patch, that's what it sounds like right now. We're going to leave the global as is, and for the oscillator we want to set the stacking mode to 11 and set the detune to 10. And then we're going to bring the mixer volume down to 0 and add modulation to the volume, setting it to MSEG number 2, and that will be used to modulate the volume on oscillator 1, and then set the amount to 100. Okay, so now we have MSEG2 displayed down here, and we can go ahead and configure that. Now what I'm going to do is actually draw it in first, and then I've saved the exact version that Adam had created as a preset, and that way we can fine-tune it if necessary to get the exact sound. So I'm going to bring handle number 1 all the way up, handle number 2 all the way up, but move it halfway between 1 and 2. Handle number 3, move that all the way over so that this is vertical. Handle number 4, we're going to move that to where it lines up with grid line number 2. Take this handle, bring it over here, have it go about halfway up, and then bring this handle all the way up. And again, this is going to be about halfway. I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here. Next, bring this handle all the way over so that it drops down. So what's going to happen is the volume is going to start high until the envelope hits this point. It's going to drop to 0 until the envelope hits this point. Then it's going to go up, gradually increase along this curve, and then drop to 0 again. Okay, that's part of it. So at this point, we can play it, and you can see how this starts to work. It almost acts as sort of like a gate effect, and you can use the multi-stage envelope generator to achieve gating effects just by drawing in the appropriate envelope. So next I'm going to bring this handle over here, have this one come up to the top, lines up with grid number 3 right around this point. It'll drop to 0, and so forth. And so I could continue drawing this in, but I think you get the idea. So now what I'm going to do is just load it from the preset that I saved for acid sequence MSEG2. And so this is the full envelope curve for MSEG2. All right. So now if we play that sequence, you'll see and hear how the volume level is controlled by MSEG2 to match this curve. Okay, so that's sort of a gating style effect because it's being used to modulate the volume. All right, next, let's go ahead and configure the envelope. So we want to set the decay time to 0. In fact, I'll do that as this plays. Set that to 0. I'm going to bring the sustain level up to 100 and set the release to 0. So let me go ahead and start the sequence. So really no noticeable change there as I brought those values down because the majority of the volume level is being controlled by this MSEG2, especially for a note that is held for a long duration as I have in this example. Now, next we're going to add VCF1 and set the filter type to BP res band. Bring the cutoff down to 65. So let me go ahead and play the sequence. Now, for the filter cutoff, we want to modulate that with MSEG1. So let me click on this, set it to MSEG1. We're going to set the amount to 64. And here we have MSEG1 displayed. And you can kind of see a faint outline of MSEG2 behind here. And that's there to help guide you if you want to have MSEG1 somehow correlate to what's going on with MSEG2. But in this case, I'm going to configure the envelope for MSEG1, and so I'm going to load it. And so now, in fact, I'll reset MSEG1 modulation amount here on the filter to 0, play the sequence, and gradually bring this up to 64. So let me go ahead and do that now. And just to make it more obvious of what MSEG1 is doing to the cutoff frequency, I'm going to bring MSEG2 down to 0 and bring the volume up to 100 so that you can just hear the effect that MSEG1 is having on the cutoff frequency. And now I'll do that again, but I'll gradually bring MSEG2 all the way up to 100, and you'll hear the effect that that is having on the volume. Okay, next we want to also have LFO Global 1 or LFO G1 modulate the cutoff frequency. I'm going to increase the amount to 60. And now we want to change the sync time to 4, so this will be 4 bars. Bring the amp down to 82. And set the shape to triangle. Okay, now we want to add some distortion, so we're going to set this to shape 1, add a shape 1, and now set the type to wedge and bring the depth up to 72.5. And then bring the edge down to 32. And I'm just going to zoom in vertically on this guy so we can see the waveform. Okay, that's it for the basic setup of the sound sources and modulators. So next we want to move and go ahead and set up the effect. So let's add EQ1. And here we're going to set the low shelf filter just below 175 Hertz and put in a -6 dB cut. And for all of these filters, the resonance value is going to be set to 0. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that now. Set all of the filter resonance values to 0 by right-clicking on them and dragging down. So now I will set filter 1's gain to -6 dB. Filter 2, we're going to leave that in place. Filter 3, set it near 1.75, just above it, and +5 dB boost. And then for filter 4, we're going to position that right around 8 kilohertz and apply a +4.5 dB boost. Okay, next we're going to add a delay. Set the ratio on ratio 1, set that to 50, making this a 1/8 sync time. We're going to set mix to 43. Going to lower the crossback to 1 and feedback, set that to 30. And with delay it now sounds like this. Okay, next add a reverb. And here we want to set the dry to 100 and the wet, set that to 25. So I'll bring it all the way down to 0 and gradually bring it up. Set the range to 87.5. The feedback, set that to 55. Just going to make it a little longer. Dampening, we're going to set that to 8 and leave everything else at the default. So now with the reverb it sounds like this. And I'll bring dry all the way down so you can hear how the reverb sounds. And then bring dry all the way up. And finally, we'll just make an adjustment to the output level, setting that to 58.37. Okay, now that is the patch. Now, one thing that we can do is, I just want to demonstrate what happens if we create a different MIDI clip for this, and I'll just get rid of these windows. We don't really need them anymore. So the first MIDI clip is just holding an A note down, but if we created a MIDI sequence of 16th notes, just kind of alternating, maybe have it alternate on A and E, and then maybe go up an octave to the other A here, and then duplicate that, and then maybe move this one up to A as well, and then have this come down. Then let's just hear how that sounds. Okay, I played the wrong MIDI clip by mistake. Let's play this next one. Okay, now you can hear a little pop sound, and that's probably due to the release being at 0, so we can increase that a little bit. That doesn't matter if we're just playing these long extended notes with this patch, but if we were going to do this style of clip, then and we got that popping sound, then we would want to get rid of it. So let me just increase the release a bit and it should go away. Okay, so that's gone now. So then the other thing we can do is, if I turn off the grid snapping and just shorten the notes so that there's a gap between them. Okay, that's it for this patch. I'll see you in the next video.